The Nelson Garvey Home for the Elderly. Chapter 1. An Arrival. Chapter 1 traditionally starts with an arrival. As with any tale, there are other places I could start, but Terry's arrival seems as appropriate as any. Terry always looked the place over before going in somewhere new, though it rarely stopped him entering. Getting in here was a stroke, a deliberately sought, planned and worked for one, but still a stroke. Old habits die hard, though. He turned up well before the appointed time and established a post at the bus stop over the road. With his suitcase leant against the back of the bus shelter, he sat down and took it all in. The building he was looking at was mid-Victorian, drawn up large and well proportioned. Terry put mental inverted commas around phrases like that. They were the sort of things he could imagine people saying without identifying exactly who. Phrases like a well-known phrase or saying. The main fabric was built of yellow stocks, the common South London brick of the time, laid 3 stretchers, 1 header. Good regular Flemish bonding with a thin layer of mortar that a modern bricklayer would find difficult to emulate. The original weather pointing was still almost perfect in the more sheltered places. Red stocks and limestone had been used to effect where there were things like projecting corners or soldiers over the windows. And everything was topped off with a real slate roof, surmounted by an imposing chimney and fitted with cast iron gutters and downpipes. The architect and artisans responsible knew their craft, and it was well sited. Large and detached, it faced the common and occupied a good-sized plot on the corner of a junction, large enough to be worthy of a traffic light. Thus far, he approved. But the additions and subtractions of those who followed the original builders nearly all offended him. Waste pipes, overflows and ventilators pierced the walls. Odd-coloured bricks and flettons have been used to fill in where holes have been knocked too large or windows no longer required. Disused insulators and bits of plastic gutter were tacked on or left over. Altogether, everything done since the completion of construction expressed expedience, in direct opposition to the original Victorian intent. Then there was what he could see of the grounds. Those shrubs and a high wall along the roadside concealed the rear. The tenacious shrubs clung on in bark-covered beds between trees. A thin skim was attempting to contain the gravel drive, which, refusing to be contained, was flashing through its tarmac in slow-motion volcanoes. Originally, the drive had passed across the front of the house from one road to the other, but now one end had been cut off to stop opportunists taking shortcuts past the lights, and a turning circle added. A combination of the best possible motives and the worst possible taste had united to mar something that was of its time, he decided. Then, in a more practical vein, it was some cowboy that tarmacked that drive. Terry paused in his thoughts for a second and pictured the way it had once been, where carriages once turned on tuned gravel. A pause. The surrounding grounds, now woefully run down, had mossy banks to take one's ease, and springtime bulbs beneath the trees. He was starting to get lyrical when he was distracted by a development over the road. Mr. Fusspot came to an upstairs window and set up his observation post. It was much more professional than a simple twitching net curtain. Terry wondered who he was going to watch. Time passed. A bus came and went at the bus stop. Time passed. A van made a delivery to the home's kitchen. An elderly woman whose upright profile stirred an ancient memory joined Mr. Fusspot. Suppose that's how life is here, thought Terry. Old memories. No, really. Who is she? Mr. Fusspot fussed the old lady away from the window. His target must be due. Another bus came and went. It moved off, leaving behind the familiar smell of diesel and humanity. The plastic bus shelter seat was getting hard, and it was too high and at the wrong angle. It's a hard world, thought Terry, when the only place to go is the bus shelter, and they have deliberately made it so uncomfortable you won't stay. He stood up and went round the back of the shelter for his suitcase. As he crossed the road, he glanced up at Mr. Fusspot's window. And I wondered who he was waiting for, he thought to himself. Good to know I'm still the main event. A bit slow of me, though. I must be getting old. If he only knew. He smiled, though it didn't show, and glanced up at the building again. Not as old as this place. Must date from William Morris's time, he thought. It gave him a comfortable feeling that he had culture. To be able to name Morris and know something of his contemporaries, designs and the period he belonged to. Not that there'd be any Morris on the walls inside. Magnolia emulsion, I expect. Then looking at the stainless steel box on the side of the building. But that vent means it's got central heating. Handy in England. I mustn't be a grumpy old man. Cheerfully determined, he stumped off to meet the watchers. We can keep an eye on each other inside in the warm. Peter liked to be at the front of the house well before a new resident arrived to see who we're getting. Old habits die hard. Perkin annoyed him, fussing old woman with not enough to occupy her mind. Mind you, here am I, occupying my mind, setting this up for a nobody. And the only person in the street is the one at the bus stop over the road, leaving, not coming. Maybe I could do with a bit more to do. It leaves me a bit irritable. But they put up with that here. And he smiled deviously. Some time later, as a 63 arrived and left, Peter realised that both the 63 and a 155 already passed the bus stop, and the man there since before he arrived at the window had hailed neither. As the second 63 left, the man unfolded the handle of a suitcase concealed behind the bus shelter and, trailing it behind him, started across the road. He was an upright, slightly built man, tidily dressed, an elderly person. After crossing the road, he stopped on the pavement to check out the garden and the building from closer to. Glancing casually over Peter's observation point. Peter wasn't fooled. He was annoyed with himself for not realising, but at the same time impressed. He looked forward to meeting someone who appeared at least half awake. There you go, you've met 3 of the main characters and you know where we are. Chapter 2 will come up very shortly and I shall continue. I think there are 30 chapters in all. Please do have a listen to my short stories as well if you wish. Bye bye.